What's going on, everyone? You're back with your boy Jono for another quick math lesson. Today we're going to have a look at dot plots and frequency tables, and these are the fundamental kind of ideas when we're talking about data displays. So one of the ideas that you absolutely have to be on top of for this entire topic is how can we represent data or information in a way that is very visually appealing. That's really the goal for a lot of this. We want to take all of this data and put it into something or synthesize it into a display that can communicate what we want to an audience. The best thing for us is that in maths, these questions are always worth heaps and heaps of marks because there are a few steps, but the mathematics behind it is not too hard. As long as you've got patience, a ruler, and a pencil, I guarantee you're going to find these pretty easy. Just making sure that our setting out is neat is about half the battle. And I reckon you can do that if you put your mind to it. So we're going to have a look at a frequency table first. A frequency table means that it will tell us how many times an outcome occurred while we were recording data. So in this example, it's really easy. How many goals did my team score in a soccer match? So the score there is on the left-hand side. I either scored 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 goals, and that's all we need to really think about. They're the goals that we could have scored throughout the season. The frequency on the other side is how many times I did score 0 goals. So in that very first row, where it's the 0 and 4, team scored 0 goals 4 times. I think that makes quite a lot of sense. So the frequency is how often it occurred, and the score is the outcome that we were looking for or that we recorded down. So the first question here is just the games played, and this is really easy. Because we've recorded the frequency of the goals each game, all we have to do is add up all these numbers. So if I go 4, then 6, then 11, blah, 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 all the way down, if I add all those up, the answer is 30, and that is how many games I played. Because I recorded them each time, that's all I've got to do. The next one is the range, and this is something that I do want you to really focus on before we get started. The range is not the range of frequencies. The range is the range of outcomes. So the most goals that my team scored this year was 4, and the least was 0. So the range of goals scored, or the range of outcomes, is just 4 minus 0, which is equal to 4. A lot of my students do use the 11 and 2 because they're the two biggest gap in the frequencies, but you've got to make sure we're looking for the range of outcomes, not the range of frequency. To find the mode is super easy. Mode means most common. So whichever score has the highest number in the frequency is the mode. So we scored 2 goals most often through this season, so that's our answer. So to find the median, that's also really easy. So remember, to find the median, it's the number of data points plus 1 divided by 2, and that'll tell us what score is the median value. So for this, it's 30 plus 1 divided by 2, which is 15.5. So all we've got to do is look at where the 15.5th score would lie. So the 4 where I scored 0 would be the lowest 4 marks. Then I got 6 1s, so they would be the next lowest. And then I had 11 2s. If I was adding this up, it would be 4, then 6, which is 10, plus the 2s, which would be 21. That jump from 10 to 21 is my median because that's where the 15.5 would lie. So the answer is just 2. Finding the mean is definitely the hardest thing that we could do off one of these frequency tables. So we want to know how many goals would we score on a random average game. So what we've got to do there is add up all the goals we scored in total and then divide it by the number of games we played. So in order to do this, you just have to use a little bit of common sense. So for the 4 games that I scored 0 goals, I scored 0 goals. For the 6 games I scored 1 goal, I'm at 6 goals. Then, as we talked about, the mode there, 11 games where I scored 2, that's a total of 22 goals in total. So what you really have to do is multiply the score by the frequency. So the first one's 6, then we got 22, then 21, and then finally 8. If I added all those numbers together, I would have 57 divided by 30, which is equal to 1.9. So what we've got to be able to do is take this information from a frequency table and put it into a data display, which we're calling a dot plot. These are the most basic out of all our data displays, and you're going to see why in a second. So in this frequency table, it's a little bit different. Maybe it's marks and a test. And I've got students that got 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So they're the score, and then the frequency is on the other side. So I had 2 students that scored 20. So all you have to do is draw out an axis like I've done and make the gaps even. So I'm going from 20 to 21 to 22 all the way up, and in each gap I've left a centimetre. That's usually worth a mark. If you leave a gap that's way too big or way too small, your teacher might dock you one. So just take the time to actually measure it out using a ruler. Then all you've got to do is above that 20 score, I've got to put 2 dots because that's how many times it happens. That's the frequency. The only way that you can make a mistake here is, again, the distance between the dots matters. You have to use what we call a consistent scale. So I just always use the lines on my graph paper. If I go up, put a dot exactly 1 box above the line, and then I do it again, you will get this right. So all we've got to do is put the dots in. I've got 2 dots above 20, put those in, the same gap away, full marks. Then I've got 3 above 21, 4 above 22, none for 23, so I can just leave that gap. Don't not put 23 in there, even though there's not a score there. You still have to leave the gap, otherwise the scale will get messed up. Then I've got 2 for 24 and 1 for 25, and I'm done. That's all the work you've got to do. So when you see the frequency, put the dots. The only way you can really lose marks here is if you rush it and don't take your ruler into the test. So now we're going to find out some of the same information that we did in the last one, just using the data table. So the total scores here is super easy. Instead of adding up all the numbers, I'm just going to count the dots, and there's 12 of them. So that's how many students took this test. The mode as well is incredibly easy from this. Whichever stacks the highest is the mode. So in this example, it's 22. The range is the top number on my number line minus the bottom one. So that's 25 is the highest score, minus 20, which was the lowest score. So the range is 5. Now finding the median is actually much easier using this one. I love to use the cross off the bottom, cross off the top, and you'll get your correct answer. The only thing that happens with this is just make sure you pick whether you're going from the bottom or the top of your column. So for here, I cross off a 20, cross off a 25. Then I cross another 20, and now I've got to move over to the 24 and cross that out. Keep doing this until you've got 1 or 2 results. They're your middle 2. And then you might have to find the average. But for this one, as we cross them all off, we eventually get to 2 22s as our middle score. So that's our median. Now to find the mean is probably the most maths you've got to do. We've got to add up the total amount of marks my students got and then divide it by 12 because 12 of them took the test. So we can do this in one step in our calculator. We just have to go slow and use brackets. So the 2 students that got 20 would have contributed 40 marks to the total. But instead of doing that maths in my head, what I can do is bracket 20 times 2. That accounts for those 40 marks. Then I've got to add that to the 3 students that got 21. So if I do 21 times 3, that accounts for their marks. So putting them in the brackets means that you don't have to do the multiplication by yourself. The calculator will do it for you. As long as you use the brackets and go slow, you'll get these right. So 22 times 4 plus, no 23s, but 24 times 2, then plus 25. Because there's only one of those, I don't have to put in times 1, but you can if you want. Now my calculator will do this. As long as you've got that in the total, you'll be sweet. Again, just make sure you have a guess first. We know the mean's going to be between 20 and 25. So if you've got something outside of that range, there's no way you've done it correctly in your calculator. Hit equal here, the mean's 22, that makes sense. That's all we've got to do for this one. So I do understand that that is the hardest part of these questions. Finding the mean when there's lots of data is annoying, but instead of going 20 plus 20 plus 21 plus 21, you can use multiplication to make sure there's less potential for you to make an error. Thanks so much for watching this video, guys, and I'll see you later.